service. Actually, we are working through a webinar session, the one we are currently joining, in which we have every week one single guest from all over the world, and he will speak about his experience, his knowledge, his tangible daily routine, let's say, across business, across country. Then we added in the last couple of weeks a new platform, a new service as an interview, always with international guests. Is less than 10 minutes digital content, and I will invite you to take a look on the previous interview that we had with Francesco Marino. They spoke about the space, in particular the last news about SpaceX and Elon Musk, incredible tangible experience. And then in the next week, probably we are going through a new service that will be the mentorship program. As you can understand, the young professional is really the arts of our community. So we want to be and to represent a blank space in which young professionals from all over the world can start, can arrive, can discuss, can share an opinion, and also can do a network. So today, before left the word to Matteo that will run our conversation, I will say some words about Mattia, that is our international guest. He's an international guest, let's say, because he has experience not only in Italy, not only in UK, but also in US. He's an entrepreneur, and today we speak and we will introduce us in the world of education. In particular, the ones we really take care, the digital and the technological phase of education. So I will left the word to Matteo. Thank you so much for everyone to joining us, and feel free to contact us in case you have ideas, you want to be part of the community, you want to really create some contents with us. We are totally open and totally free. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Simone. So, as Simone mentioned, we're here to share insights from across the industry. We've had speakers from the likes of the IMF to Amazon, from the world of the startup accelerators, for example, last week. And this week, happy to present to you guys Mattia Pastore. So, as Simone mentioned, he's the founder / co-founder of USA Student Advisors / P2P E-Learning Italia. He's also had education and work experience in the US, in New York, and has worked for the likes of EY, and is now currently, if I'm not mistaken, pursuing his MBA at LBS at London Business School. So welcome, Mattia.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you. Thank you guys very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. No, thanks for joining. So before you get started, just a quick housekeeping for the guys on the call. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to either post your questions in the chat during the presentation, and then after the presentation for the Q&A, you can I'll ask those questions directly to the presenter, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask the questions directly yourself. So you can also unmute and engage with the presenter. So you can post your questions in either written format or ask the question yourself. So I think without further ado, then I think now the floor is yours, Mattia.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, and thank you all for connecting to this week's webinar. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, AITB Community, for inviting me. Today we'll be speaking a little bit more about EdTech and the future of education. But we'll also be touching upon how COVID-19 has played a role in EdTech and in the disruption of education. So without further ado, let's get into the agenda for today. I will start with a brief background about myself, even though Matteo has already introduced me perfectly. I will then touch on some of the issues that we've seen with education following COVID-19, as a result of COVID-19, as a matter of fact. And then we'll dive into EdTech. So we'll have a short overview about what EdTech is, but most importantly, something that I think is very important to understand whenever we look at new technologies and new business models is understanding what are the trends that are allowing EdTech to be extremely relevant now and even more in the future. And then we'll look at EdTech's role in the future of education. We'll then touch upon how I personally am finding myself in this industry and how I'm basically running the wave of the EdTech industry. And finally, I will leave you guys with some closing remarks on what I believe is the future of education across primary, secondary, as well as higher education. All right, so let's get right into it. A little bit about myself, guys. I was born and raised in Italy, as you can detect from the accent. But I moved to the United States when for the 4th year of high school. I was supposed to be there for just 1 year. I ended up staying there for 9.5. So things didn't go exactly according to plan, as a matter of fact. But it was a fantastic 9.5 years. I studied in New York at Pace University, thanks to a very high tennis scholarship that I was very lucky to receive. And the experience in the US is what has made me realize two major things. Number one, the US university experience is absolutely tremendous, and it's spectacular. It's really probably the best experience of my life. It's a tough fight with the current MBA experience. But it really is like something that has changed me personally and professionally. The second thing that I realized by studying in the US is how hard the admission process to American universities and overall to international universities is for international students. And following some research that I've done on the Italian market, I realized that there was very few companies that assisted students in navigating this very complicated process. And that's how in 2013, while I was in university, I decided to found my first entrepreneurial venture, USA Student Advisors. USA Student Advisors that offers a range of services to students from the age of 14 to the age of about 26 when they enter the workforce. We start with the typical study abroad programs, exchange years in high school, and we go all the way to career coaching, specifically CV review, cover letter review, and interview preparation. But in the middle, you find really what our core business and flagship service is, which is the college counseling service, which is an end-to-end service in the admission process to universities across the globe. In fact, we have students for Europe, the United Kingdom, USA, of course, but also Canada and Australia. When I graduated from university in 2015, I started my professional experience in New York, where I've worked for 3.5 years. However, while I was in New York working full time, my company, USA Student Advisors, kept growing tremendously, up until the point that I had to make a decision, and I decided that I wanted to focus myself on my entrepreneurial venture. And that's when I decided to move back to Europe. And in the process of doing that, I thought that an MBA would be the perfect experience to really prepare myself for this new role that I was going to take full time. And I applied to INSEAD and London Business School. I was very lucky that I was admitted to from both universities. And in August of last year, I started my MBA at London Business School. And then we get to 2020, when we all got hit by this terrible pandemic at the beginning of the year. And that's when my second project comes in. In April of this year, I started a not-for-profit venture called P2P E-Learning Italia. We refer to it as P2P, which is substantially a free tutoring platform, both live and on demand for middle school, high school, and university students. And as a matter of fact, what we want to do with P2P is something that AITB is doing fantastically, but really offering another opportunity and another platform for students to really explore their curricular, but also extracurricular interests. So let's get right into what COVID has done to education since the pandemic has hit us all. Well, we all know we went from classroom learning to e-learning, and that came with with quite a few issues, unfortunately. I've had several conversations with teachers and students, especially within the Italian market, I must say, but also in the UK and the USA as well. And what we've really seen, especially for the Italian markets here, is 4 major trends. The first one, which is actually what has prompted me to start P2P e-learning, is that there was an inability to reach students. I actually started P2P e-Learning Italia after reading an article on La Stampa that stated that 1.6 million students were at home without lessons since the beginning of March. And that's obviously not only related to school not being able to provide a digital delivery of lessons. Unfortunately, there is some social, cultural, and economical factors that are affecting this number as well. The second trend that we've seen by speaking with students and teachers is an ability to engage students. There's been a very, very poor classroom participation on the virtual classroom side. And we know that this is due to a couple of reasons, in my opinion. One of them I'll touch upon soon enough, but the other is the fact that, especially in Italy, students have gotten a free pass this year. So they were admitted directly to their next year of high school, middle school, which may sound very normal for our international guests, but for Italians, as we unfortunately very well know, actually it's quite common to fail years. And this year, regardless of your grades before the pandemic hit, and regardless of your class attendance during COVID, every student was accepted to the next year of the next grade. And part of the reason why I think that there was an inability to engage students is actually caused by the inability to make proper use of technology for digital delivery by teachers. Firstly, I obviously want to clarify here, I don't want to say that that's the case across the board. Absolutely not. But I'm talking to you about trends that I've seen from speaking with students and teachers themselves. Unfortunately, teachers were not ready to go on to digital delivery of lessons. And that has brought a lot of difficulties for them to actually deliver the material and continue the learning experience for students. Finally, the fourth and last trend that I've seen is the inability to test and grade students. And once again, this has not been a problem as long as everybody was passed and got a free pass this year, but obviously this is not sustainable in the long term, especially if something that we all do not want to happen happens, which is a second wave. And then there is another trend that I want to discuss because I think it's actually very important, which is a trend related to families. Families found themselves, once they were able to start going back to work. I know many of us have continued to work remotely, but that's not the privilege for many other families. They found themselves with children, maybe in primary school, at home, without, being at school where they're taken care of for most of the day. And that actually became quite a big problem for families that had to deal with this situation. So now that we've gotten a context of what COVID-19 has brought to education, let's jump into EdTech, and then we'll see how this all connects together. So firstly, what is EdTech? I've heard a lot of definitions of EdTech over the past months and years, and that's absolutely fine because EdTech is such a large topic and it touches upon so many different industries and has so many different business models that it's impossible to give it just one definition. However, I've heard a lot this one definition, that EdTech is the use of technological equipment and software to facilitate education. Well, that is it's not enough really to define EdTech, because EdTech is actually much more than that. So I prefer to use the definition that the Association for Educational Communication and Technology has given to EdTech, which you see down here. EdTech is the study and ethical practice of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological processes and resources. Now you're like, okay, you've definitely not clarified what EdTech is. And this is probably a quite complicated definition. So let's try to break it up a little bit. So EdTech is definitely about hardware and software. Don't get me wrong. It's hardware and software is an integral part of many EdTech's business models. But more often, EdTech hardware and software tools like PCs, tablets, even virtual reality, and of course, video communications are more often so the means that allow EdTech to be delivered to the students. But EdTech, especially in on its applications to learning, is actually much more than that. And EdTech is the perfect combination of science, neuroscience specifically, psychology, pedagogy, and algorithmic processes that allow you to have a much better personalization of the offer that you have to students. And it draws from science, as I said, but also from newer technologies like big data, AI, and machine learning that are key to EdTech and to its purpose. But why has EdTech risen over the past years, even before COVID-19? What are the trends that have really allowed EdTech to be so relevant in today's world? Well, there is 5 major trends that I've personally identified, and I will be briefly discussing with you guys. The first one is the cost of storing data. The second one is the growth of processing power, as well as the decreasing cost of processing power. The third one is connectedness across the globe. The fourth is rise of intelligent algorithms. And the fifth is neuroscience advancements. So very briefly, for cost of storing data, guys, we went from a cost per gigabyte of $1 million in about 1980 to well below 10 cents that we have today. And that has been huge for any industry really, and for any company, but at the EdTech industry in particular. In fact, 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And 80% of it still remains unstructured. So you guys can just imagine the incredible opportunity that there is here, not only for the EdTech industry. The second trend is the growth of the computing power, as well as the decrease in the cost of computing power, which you see the decrease over here in this graph, and the growth of the computing power here. We are in 2020, right here. The third element is growth in connectivity. And these 2 graphs over here, the first one shows you internet users by world region. The second one shows you smartphone users by world region. And I want to highlight that this is over a very small period of time. We're looking at 2005 to 2015 for smartphones, about 1995 as the beginning of the internet as we know it. And Asia, as you can see, for example, highly populous regions like Asia have grown exponentially over the past 15 years. And that has been a key to EdTech's applicability. Fourth, the rise of intelligent algorithms, which, in my opinion, along with the neuroscience advancements, is the most important factor to the rise of EdTech. Well, artificial intelligence market was worth about $0 in 2016. We are now at almost $5 billion. We're expecting to more than double within 2 years. We're expected to grow 6 times by 2025. You see this incredible growth in intelligent algorithms that has actually been powered by a number of the factors that I've showed you guys before. And finally, as I was mentioning, neuroscience advancements that have really been key to really understanding something that we all knew, us that we've been in school for a long time, which we all learn differently. We all have a different learning approach. And as a result, we would love to have a different teaching approach to our education. As we know, unfortunately, that's not often possible, because obviously teachers need to make decisions when they decide how to teach material. And oftentimes they decide to make use of either the way, as far as teaching a way that is more, that they're more, they have more confidence in, or the one that is applicable to the wider range of students. So now that we've seen really what EdTech is and what the trends are in EdTech, let's really try to put into perspective, what can EdTech do to us? And in order to identify how EdTech can play a role right now as well as in the future, I've identified 4 major trends, but I want to focus on 2 specifically. The first one is increase reach. The second one is facilitate learning. The third one is enhance learning. And the fourth one is facilitate testing and grading. Well, the second one and the fourth one are very important right now in COVID times. But for the sake of time, I want to focus on 2 specifically. The first one is increase reach. And in order to explain increase reach, I'd like to take an example. An example made by Anant Agarwal, who is the founder of edX. edX is an online platform in the US that offers free online courses to students from across the globe, as a matter of fact, especially high school and university students. It was founded by Anant Agarwal, who is also a very, very well-renowned professor at the MIT. Well, Anant at MIT taught many courses, but one of his most popular ones, in fact, one of the most popular ones at MIT, was Circuits and Electronics. Well, this course was offered by edX in 2012 for the first time. That year, the course reached over 155,000 students for more than 120 countries. At the end of the course, 7,500 of them completed it successfully. Well, Anand said, if I had to do what I did with edX in class at MIT, it would have taken me 35 years to teach all these students this material. So here you can see the huge and extremely powerful impact that e-learning and EdTech can have on education. It can really make education available to all. And you can understand how impactful that can be in socio-economical and cultural environments where, unfortunately, education is not at the level at which we see it, especially in the Western world. And the second one that I want to talk about, the second trend that is very important, is enhanced learning. Why can EdTech enhance learning? Because it can provide personalized learning for everyone. What we were saying before is that we all learn differently, and that's quite clear to all of us. And there is obviously major learning theories, and neuroscience from this perspective has done huge advancements over the past 40 years in really understanding the human brain and how we interact with things. Well, if we add the technology to the picture, especially big data, as well as artificial intelligence and machine learning, we are really able to create a perfect solution, because these technologies really interact with you and learn as if they were students. And if they learn more about how you interact with the technology, about how you interact with the learning material. And they are able to personalize the material based on what the best way for you to learn is. So you can imagine how powerful that is on an educational scale, because that could potentially allow for students not to get lost over the years and really find the perfect match for everyone. So guys, now that we've really understood a bit better what EdTech is, what the major trends that have been affecting it, and what the future trends can be, I'd like to take an opportunity to explain how I have applied these concepts and these trends to my personal entrepreneurial career. I could speak about USA Student Advisors for a long time, because we actually started with a digital business model 6 years ago when we started the company, and that has been a key to our company's success. And we're actually doing quite a lot right now to run some of these major trends. But today, for the sake of time, I'll focus a bit more on P2P. We started P2P in April, me and my co-founder Lorenzo, because of a need that we've seen. And the need was what I was talking to you about before, when I identified the major trends that in how COVID has impacted education. Well, our goal with P2P is making quality education not a privilege for the few, but a basic need fulfilled for all. And from this perspective, we've worked extremely hard to create a model that could be sustainable in the long term, that could be available for students even after COVID, even if it's a not-for-profit project. So from this perspective, we've really understood who our primary customers were. And we tried to create a value proposition for both of our primary customers. Our primary customers were students and tutors. And with tutors, I also include teachers. The value propositions to teachers is, in fact, that we are not here to replace you. We're actually here to help, to give an additional hand in a very difficult time. And then we actually implemented a tool through our platform that we use that allows teachers to track students' engagement. What does that mean? That the teacher is able to see if the student completed the lesson, completed the quizzes that they may have assigned directly through the platform. The second primary customer to us was the students, of course. And from that perspective, we've created a platform that is fully online with lessons live and on demand. But we've also tried to create lessons that are easily digestible by students. So how did we do that? Well, first of all, we created short lessons, maximum 30 minutes long, because actually scientific research tells us that the human being's attention span goes anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes. And this is one of the powerful things about e-learning, that actually allows you to create short lessons because you can have them at multiple times during the day. Well, we did the same with P2P. We created very short lessons, easy to digest, and of course, we made use of visual learning. We actually made great use of the technological tools that are available, for example, to teach STEM subjects like math and physics, but we've actually used visual learning also for subjects that are more humanistic subjects like philosophy or Italian literature. Why? Because it's been scientifically proven that matching a picture to a content that you're explaining is way more effective. So we really hope that this gets implemented by schools even when we go back to physical learning. P2P is a platform in which we have both teachers. We were so fortunate to have some teachers embark in this journey with us. As a matter of fact, we went from concept and ideation to a fully working platform within 2 weeks, a platform that had over 80 lessons, because we were able to onboard teachers, but we were able also to onboard high school and university students that are offering free tutoring to their own peers. And from this perspective, we actually we ran a wave that is actually not new at all, because peer-to-peer learning was definitely not founded by myself nor P2P. Peer-to-peer learning comes from the years of Aristotle, when in his own university, he was using his own students to explain material to other students because he really believed in it. And over the years, they've done several research investigations on the topic. And as a matter of fact, peer-to-peer learning is used by all the major universities in the US and the UK, and it's offered for free, or better said, we shall say, included in the price of the universities abroad, is part of the educational experience. Why? Because it first provides personalized learning at reduced cost. Secondly, it has proven to increase the attention and the engagement with the material by the students who are there to learn. Thirdly, it fortifies school spirit and peer-to-peer support. And fourth, it fortifies self-esteem, ability to work in teams, and social interactions, which are all extremely important trends, especially in a digital age where we're going much more from physical interaction to social media interactions. So now that we've understood about P2P, I want to leave you guys with some remarks as far as what I believe the future of education is, and where I believe the opportunities are, also as far as business models, potentially for some of you that may be interested in starting your own venture and are attracted by the education space. Well, the first thing that I want to tell you is that COVID-19 may not be here to stay but it's been here long enough, and it will be here long enough for the fact that the impact will be felt and the impact will stay. What does that mean? That means that a lot of the businesses and business models that will be created based on some disruption that COVID-19 has created and have probably entered the markets by penetrating either the low end or the new end of the market, by probably taking inspiration from Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation, which I urge you all to read in case you're not familiar with it. Christensen is a very, very famous professor from Harvard that passed away a couple of months ago. Well, coronavirus have created such disruption and has created the need for new business models and new ways to solve problems in education, that people are going to realize that these ways are actually going to be applicable even after that COVID leaves us. So that's the first major trend that I want to leave you with. The second is works across the globe, so both from primary, secondary, and higher educations. I believe that virtual platforms that will make the classroom as little virtual as possible and as much physical as possible by remaining virtual, they will really have the upper hand. They will probably be able to disrupt the market. From this perspective, I can tell you that there is already quite a few businesses that are trying to do these type of things with virtual reality, especially. And I really think that these firms will be very well positioned, or the ones that will come will be very well positioned. The second major trend that I believe that we'll see across the globe in education is the entrance of big tech in education. And we know from other industry like health tech that when big tech enters an industry, it usually enters an industry with a lot of resources and a lot of tools to take it over. So expect an entrance by big tech in the industry, and you've already seen Google really taking steps to do so, but even Microsoft with Microsoft Teams platform. Then if we focus on primary and secondary school, we definitely are going to see the rise of personalized learning. I have no doubt about that. However, and I think that this is the twist that I find particularly interesting, I want to remind you of one thing, that school is more than just learning, especially at the primary level, where oftentimes it provides a solution to parents who are working and cannot keep students at home. So I think that the real businesses and business models that will succeed in this market are the businesses that are going to be able to create a hybrid. So the huge and very powerful personalization that you can create with technology, with e-learning, but paired with a physical experience that serves the way that the needs of parents. Talking instead of about higher education, that I know quite well for having been in the industry for a long time, the first thing that I can tell you is that many universities, especially in the US and the UK, are at risk of survival. In the US alone, we talk about hundreds of universities that are at risk of survival after COVID-19. And they will fail, but the rest will remain. And I believe that the rest will be finding ways to remain relevant and to bring students back to the classroom. And when I say that, I mean even as far as technological advancements and solutions to bring students back to the classroom in a safely manner. I also believe that international education is here to stay. People will always choose international education because of several reasons related to cosmopolitization, which is also here to stay, in my opinion. However, students will start to become way more picky, and they will really look for the right solutions for themselves at the right price. There will be a huge rise in universities online, of course, but also in specialized programs. What I mean with specialized programs is programs that prepare you for specific careers. And finally, I think something that is a very important trend, and I'll leave you guys with this, is the need to prepare students for the new way of working. Because one thing we know for sure, the way in which we work has probably changed forever. And it has changed forever, not because COVID-19 will stay forever, but because companies have realized that working remotely is possible, and it can actually be very effective. From this perspective, we have examples from, for example, Twitter, that has announced that their employees can work from home from ever moving forward, but also Facebook itself has made several announcements from this end. Well, this is the last trend that I want to leave you guys with. I want to thank you guys very much for listening. Thank you again, AITB, for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've left my contact info here on the slides in case you guys would like to contact me in private as well for any question. And I'm obviously here at your disposal for the Q&A session. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mattia, for your presentation. That was really insightful, and the topics that you were covering are really contemporary in terms of what we're seeing. And it was really interesting to see your thoughts about the future. So we have a few questions in the chat. Before we get there, however, just to give a bit more time to other people who may have some questions, I'll open up the Q&A with an observation of mine. And I like the way in one of your slides you're talking about how obviously online education increases reach, right? We can be educated from anyone, anywhere sometimes. And I've actually experienced this personally at work. So at work, my company has funded access to Coursera. You may be familiar with that website.
Of course.
And we have, free access to all of the website. And so now I'm doing, industry recognized qualifications from universities across the world, or from even our competitors, so from big companies as well. And it's really making it very easy to be educated in almost anything that you're interested in. So it's really, having a big impact. So I'll go on to some of the questions then. So the first question is from Emanuela, I believe. And I think this is related to your P2P E-Learning Italia. And she's asking if you're recruiting volunteer teachers at the moment.
Thank you, Manuela, for the question. Thank you very much. And yes, certainly, we are always seeking for passionate individuals that are passionate about something and will be aware that with P2P, there is no such thing as a minimum time commitment, a minimum work requirement, nothing like that. It needs to be something that you do passionately and with your own time based on what your own schedule is. So, Emanuela, definitely recruiting a new talent to help out as tutors, and very happy to connect after the chat. I think here we also have my co-founder in the chat, Lorenzo, who is a real champ, and I can have you have a chat with him as well.
Perfect. I think this is, I'm happy she asked that question, because this really reflects what we're trying to do as AITB. We're trying to connect people as well. So the fact that now Emanuela knows what you do, knows who you are, has your contact details, can help both her and you in whatever you're doing. So this is a perfect example of what we're trying to do here, on top of, providing insights. So next question from Sahib. So from let's say a US colleague of yours. So he's currently in Washington, DC. Sahib, do intervene if I'm not interpreting your question correctly. Did you kind of change your mind, Sahib, after that first question? Or is it more of a short-term versus long-term thing?
Well, actually, like he answered part of the question like throughout the presentation, and actually it was based on the angle that he started this conversation, like how to view this disruption, what COVID has started. But it's just that disruption can be viewed in multi-directional, but then ultimately it's always the losing side, and it is quite unfortunate that the students is always receiving the short end of the stick, whether if it's the fact of not having the quality of education, let's say that you're spending so much money for a year in college, for example, compared to the facilities, compared to having this access to resources that the university is supposed to provide on campus, for example. So the student himself, even though has the option of doing this virtually, but makes it questionable the value of why do I invest so much resources and money for my education. And that disruption is that because he or she will not be so enthusiastic about continuing this education, like, virtually, and unfortunately the demands of the job recruiting will still keep on increasing. So it makes me question a lot about, why do I have to value so much education, especially now? And the fact that your initiative is trying to bridge those inequalities, or trying to avoid, this kind of slippery slope on the long term. So that's why I really wanted to have just your personal view, regardless of the short term or long term.
Right. So Hiba, thank you very much for your comment. I couldn't agree more with pretty much everything you've said. And I'll touch upon very quickly the problem of missing the physical aspect of it. That is simply huge. And I can tell you from personal experience. As I was mentioning at the beginning of the call, I'm very fortunate because I'm currently studying at London Business School, which is one of the best MBA programs in the world. And for us, the networking side, really the making those connections and creating those social interactions with the people within the MBA is by far, and I tell you, by far the most important aspect of the MBA. And this has been completely disrupted for us. And in fact, you may have heard about several MBA programs across the globe where petitions have started to request refunds, to request discounts in the tuition for the students. And unfortunately, that's just the reality. It's been a huge disruption. I can tell you with USA Student Advisors, what we're doing, we're working extremely close to our students because they're always our primary focus on deferred admissions. So admissions that will allow them to not start this year, use this year for something that is really going to enrich them personally and professionally, as well as academically, to then go and start the following year university, when we'll go back to a physical experience. So really the physical experience has, and that's why I was also mentioning it later on, the key of finding this hybrid, right? Not only when it comes to primary and secondary education, especially primary, but also higher education. Really being able to find this hybrid will be key to the success of the next disruptors in the business. And to explain this better, I'd like to take an example that many of us may be able to relate with. So many of us have worked for professional services companies, management consulting companies, where you spend a lot of your time, as a matter of fact, most of your time, either at the client or outside of the office. Well, these companies have had to work very hard to create a work culture, right? To create that bond between employees that really maximizes their experience there. And they've done several things in order to really benefit their own employees by not only creating events for people to catch up and really get close to one another, but really offering professional advancement, by offering personal development options, like we were talking about with Coursera with Matteo. So I think that universities will really need to find this hybrid model, will need to find a way to really connect the students to one another in order to maintain their relevance. And to conclude on the last point that you've mentioned, which is the use of education nowadays. Unfortunately, we know that education is a must nowadays. It's just very simple. If you take a look at what the unemployment rates are for people who do not have an undergraduate education and people who do have it, or even the ROI of a master, somehow, despite they cost insane amount of money, they still have a positive ROI. Well, I think that education is here to stay, but more and more certifications are here to stay. But I would watch very closely the rise of specialized education. And from this perspective, I think that big tech may do something. Big tech may create may make an entrance in order to create their own programs that really allow them to prepare the new wave of employees for what they need. So skills like computer science and such.
That's interesting you mentioned that. That's exactly what's happening with me at the moment now at Capgemini. So, we're getting access to all of Coursera for free, and therefore I can, easily skill up and potentially give back to Capgemini. So no, that's interesting. Okay, so thanks for that. We have another question from Ricardo, I believe. So I appreciate you may have touched upon some of the stuff he's asking, but I'll ask it anyway. So what would be your advice to primary and secondary schools that will need to follow a hybrid model, with, you know, some learning happening offline and some online? How can we help teachers to adapt their offline teaching to the new reality of a hybrid model?
And well, so first of all, I think that's something that is very important. And again, we'll take a look at the Italian context, and we'll have a more general discussion. But in general, for the Italian context, is to break up all the bureaucracy that we have every time that we need to implement something. That creates huge problems because you're not able to adapt quickly. So that's something that is particularly relevant to Italy and some other of the Mediterranean countries. But overall, what must be done is invest in teachers. We must invest in teachers. We must invest in training them, in catching them up to what the newest technologies are, in catching them up to the newest scientific trends are as far as education, because that's how we'll prepare teachers better. We'll probably also need to give better, working arrangements for teachers as far as pay. Probably this is particularly true again for many of the Mediterranean countries, less so for the UK and the USA, where teachers get pretty good salaries, even though again it's nothing incredible. We must invest in our workforce, just like companies do. We must do the same with education. And let me tell you that I think that that's the first place where we would want to start, because that's how we'll create the next wave of world leaders, the next wave of people who will be managing our companies, the next wave of people who will be living in this world and will be trying to make sure that it doesn't collapse because of environmental problems and because of wars. So we really must invest in education and make it a priority for all of us, I believe.
Thank you. Cool. So we have the last written question here. And then, by the way, for anyone in the audience, after we finish the Q&A, if you want to remain, if you have some extra questions that you want to ask Mattia personally, if you want to network with him a little bit, I believe, if that's okay with you, if you have 5 minutes after the Q&A, if anyone wants to engage with you.
No problem at all.
Oh, okay,
no problem at all. My pleasure, Mattia.
Thank you. So last written question from Francesco. He's asking, so what he's basically saying is, how can we bring interactivity on these online courses as we have in a physical room? You know, how do we make something which is interactive, which is not just an online video and a few quizzes, but how can we bring a bit of engagement in there?
And that's really where I think the key is. I was touching on it a little bit with this need to really, which I mentioned as the general trend, those models that will be able to make the virtual classroom as little virtual as possible and as much physical as possible will be the ones who will succeed. Let's talk a bit about what they've been doing so far. I mean, from my personal experience, both with P2P and LBS, London Business School, with Zoom, we have polls. We have the opportunity to divide people into breakout sessions that are providing some help to that, right? But we are really still missing something there. And I think that this little something goes well beyond my capabilities, because I think that it goes into really doing research in how we interact with the screen. So what I mean is, how can we maximize our attention to something that we watch on a screen, something that we hear the voice of, rather than to be physically there? Because there isn't much research, scientific research on this yet, and I think that people way smarter than myself will start to do some. We really need to first understand how we interact with these tools, we must understand how we interact with voices and videos that come through a screen rather than a physical presence. And then again, somebody that will be way smarter than me, and hopefully maybe will want to work with me, will be able to understand how to create the technological solution to make that possible. I think that the key stands in really understanding once again the human brain at its max.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think I can bring in a few examples I've noticed recently, and it actually connects to what you were saying about big tech coming in. Like on Zoom, for example, you can virtually collaborate with other people. There's like a virtual whiteboard, for example, or like there's other websites called like Miro Masterclass, where we use at our company to run workshops. We've ran workshops with clients. We've ran workshops with, you know, about 100 people there from the client. So we've done this all virtually, which is something we would usually do physically. So we're starting to see that we can bring this interactiveness and engagement, which is really good. Okay, so
hi, sorry, can I add something?
Sorry. Oh yeah, no worries.
Hi,
no worries.
this is Emanuela. So yeah, actually super interesting. Thank you, Mattia, for sharing. In my company, well, I won't say the name, but we do have like a platform, because we are internally we are running some volunteer projects to teach English to children in the rural areas in China. And using our messaging platform, we do create some virtual class where also the students, they can join and they can come sort of call in during the lesson. So I run a few lessons with these children, and in addition to the presentation, you give them the chance to join the class. Like you are doing like classical one-to-many English class in a classroom. You can ask people to talk with you and interact with you. So this is not just about, you know, answering some quiz online or, you know, sketching together on the whiteboard, but also to give it a chance to the students to join and actively interact with the teacher, which is something that is quite easy to integrate from a technological point of view. Yeah.
Absolutely, Emanuela, and thank you for your comment. I couldn't agree more. I can tell you about a few things that we do with P2P, because obviously P2P is a not-for-profit. P2P is made up of volunteers, but P2P also has ambitious goals, and we are looking to scale the P2P as much as possible. So how have we really found ways to scale? By being extremely relevant, because what matters most to people who are on the other side of the screen is how relevant you will be to them. So what did we do for P2P when we came out in April, for example? So we chose two models that would allow us to scale. One model was to really provide lessons to classes or groups within classes of specific topics that they were having trouble understanding at that time. So imagine I have to prepare for the math exam in 3 days. You call P2P and we organize a lesson for you with one of our math teachers to really explain you the topic that you're covering for the exam. Something else that we've done, which is very important on a scalability perspective, is creating our own P2P courses. But how did we choose how to create our own P2P courses? Well, we've chosen courses and we've chosen topics that were being covered in class, in high school especially, during that time of the year. So we went and brainstormed and said, okay, what are the fourth-year high school students doing right now in the scientific liceo? They're doing Kant for philosophy. Okay, fantastic. So let's start a video series on Kant. What are students soon enough going to have to do? The Maturità. So, okay, so let's do a course that is going to review a topic that is going to be applicable for the Maturità, such as the Divina Commedia or specific topics in math. Because if you are able to be relevant and then be able to really engage the people that you're working with by providing relevant material and by having an open discussion with them, and from that perspective, I think that peer-to-peer learning helps a lot. I think that you're able to achieve that. I absolutely couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emanuela.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so I'm just going to check the chat if there's any other questions, but I believe there's no more questions.
Hi, Matteo.
So, we've
Matteo,
got another
maybe I
question. Okay.
Yes, I
Hey.
can jump in just a
No
small
worries.
cue. Okay,
That's fine.
so first things first, I would like to say that I'm astonished, Mattia, on the amount of material that you were able to create in such a small amount of time on your site. It's really great, I say. But I would like, say, to make a question which maybe opens up to, say, kind of dystopian point of view that peer-to-peer learning can bring to us. As in the time we were able to get acquainted with the notion of, say, fake news, would it be possible in the future for you to have, say, false learning? Maybe, okay, on mathematics it's not possible, physics not possible, but what about histories? What about philosophy or other stuff? Maybe can we put something that is, say, really personal and maybe is not the correct way to see an history event or something else? Say, can we go to fake learning, something like that? What do you think about this?
So Simone, first of all, thank you so much for the compliments. Super much appreciated, and really, really too nice of you. Let me just very quickly ask a clarification about your question. Are you asking me if you think, like, are you asking me if I think that there is the risk that by creating, you know, platforms like P2P, there is the risk that will go into, let's say, fake learning? So, which means that, like, pretty much I talk to you about Dante, and I tell you that he didn't write La Divina Commedia, but he wrote the Promessi Sposi. Is that the type of question that you're asking me? I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, your example is a little bit excessive, but for example, of on an historical event, I can say the fall was not for example, of Adolf Hitler, but I can tell you it was half and a half. I mean, there is space to have, say, a partial view on the history or other stuff that maybe should not be able to be mystified, say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly agree with you, Simone. And I think that the risk is there and is evident. However, my personal opinion is that you can come across that in any scenario. Let me make a simple example just by using your metaphor. Let's say we are in a history class in high school, and our teacher is an extreme right-wing person, and actually believes that Adolf Hitler was not as bad as they say, or that there was reasons why he did that. You know, she or he can come with this view and potentially really, you know, bring us a perspective that is incorrect, but it is their own, and, you know, potentially even, like, it makes us think things that are not exactly true. So I feel like we run against this risk all the time. However, I think that in a physical classroom, you have so much power to, let's say, point that out, highlight it, and say, look at that, this teacher had just taught me something incorrect. You usually have, let's say, 25 students who can do it, maybe 50 students if the teacher teaches to a lot of students. Well, the power of the internet, as risky as it is, because obviously it favors the, you know, things like fake news or you know, false learning and stuff like that. The power of the internet, though, is that it's out there and it's seen by several hundreds of millions of people. I believe that I may tell you something completely wrong, but I think that every second there is something like 21,000 searches on Google. So you're really out there. You cannot hide yourself. And if you do something, if you provide a crappy product, if you provide a bad service, either you'll be followed by the people who really like to see your ideology, that may be a crazy one, but on the other hand, you'll really be exposed by the ones who maybe have a clear view of the facts. So yes, I think it's a problem, but potentially I think that because of this exposure that you have on the internet to really being called out, we may be safer than in a physical place.
That's
Okay,
interesting.
thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess, 'cause I don't think there's any more questions, so I guess this ends the call, the AITB webinar for this week. I'd like to thank everyone who joined. I'd like to thank you, Mattia, for the work that you've put in to prepare this and to dedicate your time on this webinar. As mentioned at the beginning, if anyone wants to remain, so I'm going to remain with a few other people just to catch up quickly with Mattia for about 5 minutes or so. If any of you guys want to remain, feel free. But, you know, as mentioned, this is a platform to allow people to share insights and to network. So if any of you guys in the call would like to present one day, or if you know anyone else who would like to present, please let us know and get in contact with us. You'll find our names on the LinkedIn page as on the people section of our LinkedIn page. But that ends it here. So make sure you follow us on LinkedIn if you don't already, and subscribe on YouTube for more insights that will give you guys on a weekly basis. But that terminates things here. So thanks everyone. Thanks, Mattia. I'm going to remain on the call. Thank you. And I think a few other people are going to remain if anyone wants to network with Mattia for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So I'll end the recording now, and you guys will be able to find this recording on the internet soon.